So if you're shooting your first wedding, here are 6 things that you should definitely know beforehand. This is very exciting. Shooting your first wedding. My name is Luke Cleland and I am a wedding photographer, and I've been a wedding photographer for over 11 years now. And I love shooting weddings. It's an incredible event for photographers. And while you might feel a range of emotions right now, you might feel a little bit of terror and you might feel some excitement. That's okay. It's super normal to feel lots of things as you're going into your first wedding. But I would first say, like, congratulations. This is a big deal. It's a big deal for anyone to trust you to photograph their wedding. And I hope the things that I'm going to tell you today are going to really help you and give you more confidence as you go into shooting this event. The couple is going to talk about you for the rest of their life. Like, you are their wedding photographer. They're going to remember you. And my goal here is that it ends up not being horror stories that they're telling about you, but just great stories about how I'm the best wedding photographer and we love their images, blah, 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 blah. There are lots of things that I could tell you as you go into photographing your first wedding, but I narrowed it down to the 6 most important ones for this video. Now, if you listen to these and they're helpful to you and you're like, I want more, I put together an extensive ebook where it goes into depth, everything that I've experienced and learned over the last 11 years, and I put that into an ebook for beginners just like you. These are tips that you're not going to just learn by Googling, like, what do I do for my first wedding? So you're gonna wanna get this. You can pick one up in my store and you can find a link to that in the description below. The first thing is you need to talk to your couple. You need to get on the same wavelength. You need to understand their expectations before you even shoot the wedding. A great question to ask your couple is, say, okay, couple, your wedding is done. You get your wedding album back from me. What do you see? And let them describe what they expect to see. Oh, I expect to see candid photos of everyone having fun. Like, we want some good photos of us. Like, they're going to go through and explain kind of what they imagine. And then you can take that and maybe ask them some more questions, get some specifics. But it's really important to get a good understanding of what they want so you can actually accomplish that on the day. And then after you get that kind of broad sense of what they're looking for, then I would go through their schedule, like their whole schedule from the very beginning to the very end of the day, go through each section of what they've already scheduled and talk through it. So you know, like, okay, what do you expect to get done during this time? Like, are you doing a first look? Where's the ceremony? You want to get all of those details and know that ahead of time so nothing is a surprise to you. You do not want to be there on the day of, and then they're like, okay, we're doing family photos now. It should take you 5 minutes, right? And you'd be like, wait, what? And you have 200 family members? Yeah, you don't want that to happen. And then on the opposite side of that, you don't want them to schedule too much time for things. Like, you don't want 3 hours of couple photos, right? You're going to be like, what do we do for that long? You want to find the balance of making sure that the wedding day is moving well and it's not lagging and being like, oh, we have so much time. What do we do with this? But then you also don't want it to be so tight where it gets panicky and stressed because there's just not enough time for everything. I'm going to give you a full example schedule of what kind of elements should be in the wedding day and then about how long that I spend or I suggest spending on each of those in the ebook. The second thing is scout the location and arrive early. If this is your first wedding, I would not suggest just looking on Google Maps or just looking at venue photos. It feels very different when you're actually at the venue. And if you don't have that experience yet, I would really recommend getting to that venue ahead of time. Now, if you're in a scenario where it's like getting ready at one spot, ceremony in another spot, venue at another spot, maybe you go there ahead of time, maybe a week before, a few days before, so that you can go to the venue and scout out, like, where am I going to take these photos? Like, take some sample images, be like, okay, oh, I'm gonna shoot a couple photos at this time of day. The sun's coming from this. Okay, let me see what it looks like over here. Take the time ahead of time, take the time the morning of, if you can arrive an hour and a half early, just to walk around, get a really good idea of what you're working with. And it just helps you be comfortable with what you're shooting. And even myself, I've shot at venues before. I've shot so many weddings over the years. I still arrive early. Like, I want to be there at least 30 minutes ahead of time so I can get all my camera gear out. I can be relaxed. I can make sure, oh yeah, my camera's working. Everything's good. I like to be calm. I don't like panicking. I don't like stressing. One last thing I want to say about that is decide ahead of time, and even take test shots of all of the areas where you plan on taking the majority of photos. So have a plan of, I'm going to shoot family photos here, and maybe my backup location will be over here behind this tree or something. And if you have the time, take a couple sample photos so you know what it looks like. The third thing is keep gear simple and then have a backup of that simple gear. You don't need everything. You don't need 40 lenses, but you do need a backup. I would say the kind of minimum, kind of basic kit that you can get away with is having 2 cameras, a main camera and a backup, but you can also kind of shoot with them both at the same time. And then 2 lenses, ideally kind of a main lens and then an alternative lens, but make that alternative lens not so crazy so that you can also use it as a backup. Ideally, you should have 2 cameras, 2 lenses, and 2 flashes. That's a great example of a very simple kit that has some redundancy, so if something breaks, you have something else. Navigating a wedding day is difficult. It is a lot. It is busy. And what I want you to do is not to be so overwhelmed with your gear selections that you're so focused on that and not focused on what's happening on the actual day. I say this on my channel all the time. Make your gear simple. I personally shoot most of my weddings on one lens. I use a 50mm 1.2 Nikon lens, which I love and I talk about all the time. But you can do that too. Like, make it simple. You don't want to be running around being like, oh, should I use this or this lens? Should I use the 105? Should I use a 35? Should I use a 24-70? Like, have a plan ahead of time, make it very simple so that you're putting your brain cells towards giving the couple a good experience, to keeping your eye out for a really great moment instead of being panicked about which lens choice you should have. My 2 suggestions would be something like a 50mm prime lens and a 35mm prime lens. That's kind of like my personal favorite in terms of, like, I think that gives great coverage for a wedding day. Another great option would be to have something like a 50mm prime lens and then adding a 24-70. So maybe you have some flexibility and you have that wide option in case you're kind of stuck in a tight corner. For your first few weddings, I wouldn't typically suggest getting like a telephoto lens, something like a 70-200. I don't think that's necessary. I think if you have something like a 50mm, you can zoom with your feet, you can get closer, you can get all the shots. Having that telephoto lens is nice, and I personally, I use a 105 here and there throughout my wedding days to get those kind of tight emotional shots. But again, if you're starting out and it's the first weddings, you're going to be learning so many things. It's going to be, lens integration is like level 2, right? You want to start off with simple lenses, and then later on, as you get more and more comfortable with the actual day of the wedding, then you can start being a little bit more fancy with adding lens choice and stuff like that. And you might say, like, I don't have all of that gear. I don't have 2 camera bodies. I don't have a bunch of extra lenses. I would do whatever you can to get backup gear. So rent some gear, ask a friend for it, buy a cheap alternative so that, like, worst case scenario, if your camera dies or you smash your lens, you have something else to pull out and use to finish the wedding. The last thing I'll say about gear is about batteries and SD cards. I personally, again, going back to keeping things simple, I don't want choices, I don't want to think about too many things, is have more than enough batteries. I know that's kind of annoying because batteries, they're not really cheap, and it doesn't feel as exciting to buy as like a lens or something. But I never charge batteries on a wedding day, and I always have enough SD cards that I would never have to like unload, like, oh my goodness, never be unloading photos at a wedding. Just buy more SD cards. What I do for my weddings is I have a huge SD card, so I actually never have to switch it out of my camera. I don't love the idea of taking the SD card out and then putting it in my bag, and then like part of the wedding is on one card and part of the wedding is on another. If you want to take your stress down a lot, bite the bullet and get a massive SD card so you don't have to stress about it being split up on different cards. And that made me think too, if you have the option, get a camera with 2 card slots so that you have that backup redundancy, and set your camera to backup. Every time you take an image, it copies it onto 2 different cards. And that creates a little bit of redundancy in case something weird happens to one of the cards and they get corrupted. The fourth thing is making sure that you have your own shot list. I'm going to include some sample lists in the ebook if you need some help with that. For years, I winged weddings. I didn't like wing them, but I just felt like, okay, the wedding is going to happen how it's going to happen. And so I don't need to have this like specific list ahead of time. I'm just going to shoot it as it happens, and I'm just going to like cover everything. Now, this is a bad idea. And that's because it's incredibly stressful if you shoot weddings that way. And it's stressful because you never feel like you got what you needed. You always are in this state of like, I gotta shoot everything because there's no like checklist. So I just gotta shoot, and hope that I get enough at the end of the day to make sure, that I shot it how I wanted to shoot it. Please don't do it like that. There's an easier way, I promise. Now, at this point, the bride may have sent you a shot list. You may have already looked on the internet for shot lists, and that's fine. But what I would want you to do is sit down, and maybe you've gotten the schedule already. I want you to sit down and think about, okay, if there were 20 images, if there were 30 images, I don't know, choose a number, and that's all I shot for the whole wedding, how could I represent the whole wedding? What are the most important photos that need to be taken so that it can properly tell this wedding? And then sit down and then write down what that looks like. Then as you go through each section of the wedding day, you can do the getting ready photos, and you look down at your list and you're like, okay, I have 4 absolutely I must take these shots for the bride getting ready. And then you take those 4 shots, and then you feel like you're done because you've gotten the most important shots. And then you can move on to trying creative ideas. You can see what moments are happening. You can walk around the room and just kind of wait for things to happen that are beyond the list. But if you have this kind of checklist throughout the whole day, it takes a huge level of stress off. You're not guessing at what you need to shoot in order to properly cover the wedding day. And speaking of photo lists, I'm just going to add here at the end, make sure you have family photos list, because it doesn't matter what the couple say. If there's a photo missed, it's going to be your fault. Like it's going to be you that they ask, like, oh, by the way, did you get this photo of like me and my dad by themselves? Because I really wanted that. And then you're like, wait, what? So make sure you have a family photo list from the couple. If they don't give you one, what I would suggest, I'm going to include this in the ebook as well, is to like have a list of the most common kind of combinations and just go through that. Because, especially early on when I was shooting weddings, I would have couples say like, oh, we'll just like figure out the photos on the day of or something. Don't do that. The 5th thing is shoot lots of images. Now, if you've seen other videos of mine, you realize that this is a contradiction because I've said the exact opposite in other videos where I was like, don't shoot as much. You don't need to be shooting as much. However, if this is your first wedding, yes, you have full permission to overshoot. It's always better to make sure, especially when you're starting out, to make sure that you get those extra shots so you know when to overshoot and when not to overshoot. Especially when you're talking about group photos, you want to make sure that you take enough photos so that their eyes are all open. So if there's a big group photo, make sure you take 5, 7, 10 photos so that you get one where everyone looks good. It doesn't mean that you just like walk around and just like just photos everywhere. Like again, going back to that, shot list of the whole day, overshoot on those important photos that you've listed out, making sure that you've got them in focus, making sure that you check the photo and make sure it's exposed well, and then shoot it again. I'm not saying shoot photos of just anything that moves, but I am saying overshoot in the more important areas to make sure that you've got the photo. The sixth thing is make sure you back up your images within 24 hours. Do not wait. Like if you can go home and do it right away, do it right away. And absolutely, under no circumstances should you ever shoot something else on the same SD card that you shot a wedding with. Like you should finish that wedding, you should go home, you should copy it onto another drive. And then as soon as you copy it onto another drive, you need to back that up. Within like 24 hours, you should have those wedding photos on 2 separate drives. Like you can put one on your computer, that's fine, but make sure you have an additional backup drive as well. You should not store them on the SD card. That is a recipe for disaster. Make sure that you have it on 2 options. If you want to go further, you can make smart previews in Lightroom and then put that into the cloud, put it into Dropbox, put it into Google Drive so you have a cloud version in case something horrible was to happen. But you want to prioritize making sure that these photos are safe within as soon as possible when the wedding's done. Okay, and as I was going through these 6 things, I was like, oh, okay, there's 2 more things that I have to tell you about. I can't just leave it to 6. So here's 2 more bonus tips. The first one is relax. Now, I know you're not supposed to tell people that are stressed just to relax because it doesn't work. But I want you to, as much as possible, to take deep breaths, to relax as much as possible. Now, if you're getting asked to shoot someone's wedding, I'm assuming that you have some type of photography skill to begin with. Whether you've shot other things and you're comfortable with the camera and now you're shooting a wedding, regardless of kind of what level you're at, you need to trust yourself. Even if you're a beginner, even if you haven't shot that much, at some point, if you're going into a wedding, it's really important to feel confident, to trust your instincts, even if your instincts are very, very new. I think one of the worst things that can happen at a wedding is to get over panicked and overwhelmed by the scenario around you, because it doesn't need to be that way. Yes, weddings are stressful. Yes, there's a lot of things going on at weddings, but you can enjoy it. It can be a great experience. And I think just reminding yourself to just trust yourself, to trust the plan, I think is really going to help. If there is some point of the day where you're shooting something and your internal little instincts and red flags are going, like, trust yourself. I remember there was a bunch of times when I started shooting weddings where, a group or an individual would say like, oh, can you take a photo of me in this specific area? And there'd be like really bad pot lights in a dark corner with weird light coming in. And I felt kind of pressured, or I felt panicked to do what they wanted instead of following my own instincts. So if you're shooting something and something seems wrong, like, move it to a different area. If you shoot something and they're kind of like ready to move on, but then you realize, oh no, I was shooting at 1.2 and this is a group of like 10 people, take the time, take a deep breath and be like, oh, sorry about that. I'm just going to do one more image, move it up to F5, F4 or something and shoot it again. Take that time to make sure you've done it right. Like, Of course, there's times throughout the wedding that you can't do things again, but there are a lot of times of a wedding day where you have the opportunity to do something again. You have the opportunity to take a deep breath yourself, even tell your couple or your subjects, take a deep breath, let's pause for a second, and then do it again. And it's not a big deal. And then the second bonus tip, and this is the end, I promise, is never lose your cool. People are going to tell you how to do your job. You're going to get a lots of advice throughout the day. Some of it is going to be great advice. Some of it is going to be not as helpful. And one thing, please do this for the sake of your future in weddings, is never, ever, I repeat, never, ever talk badly about someone, anyone. If it's a venue, a family member, an uncle that's super annoying, anything like that, never talk about anyone. Just wait. Wait till you get home, and then you can vent to your friend or sister or spouse or something like that. But just bite your tongue. That's a difficult thing on wedding days because there's lots of emotions, lots of things going on. But I am telling you, put a smile on, say thank you for that feedback, and move on. It will save you so much grief in the long term. And if you keep that mindset of being positive, being happy, that is going to give your couple and all of the guests a really great experience of you. And that's almost just as important as the photos, because you're going to have people that come up to you. They come up to me at the end of the wedding day and say, "Thank you so much. You did a great job." And I was like, "Well, how do you know that I did a great job?" Well, they're experiencing what you are like. And if you're positive, if you are not overly stressed, you're pleasant, you say hi to people, and you're great to work with, that's going to be a great experience for absolutely everybody involved. So if you are shooting your first wedding and some of these were helpful, let me know in the comments which one was most helpful for you, which one did you not think about, and if you're interested to learn even more, and if you want to go on a deep dive, if you want to do the cram the night before the wedding, well, head over to my shop and download the ebook for first-time wedding photographers. I am telling you, this is going to give you so much help that it will really set you up for success for shooting your first wedding.